George Mason University did a study to see which demographic of teenagers is more likely to have unwanted pregnancies. And they specifically looked at those in the LGBT community compared to those who are not in that community. And the results are actually pretty surprising for me. So here's what happened. The researchers drew from a sample of 9,703 New York high school students, excluding those who'd never had sex or only had experiences within their own gender. Here's what they found. Pregnancies were reported by 13.3% of heterosexual females and by 13.7% of females who had only ever slept with men. But that figure actually climbs to 23% if the respondent identified as lesbian or bisexual, and to 20% for females who slept with women and men. So let's stop right there. We have the statistics for men as well, but why is this? Why is it that if you're a member of the LGBT community, if you are not straight, let's just put it that way, you're more likely to have an unwanted pregnancy?
You can look at me. This is my life here. You know, I am openly gay, and also I was a teen parent. And part of this, we talked about this outside, is there's a lack of education for LGBT kids, first of all. And so you normally have access as a heterosexual kid to different places. So when you're an LGBT youth, you're searching for information of how do I interact? How do I find love? How do I find affection? Also align that, you're looking for acceptance. Yeah. And when you're looking for acceptance, you do things that sometimes can have destructive results. Not saying a child is a destructive result, but if you're a teen parent and you're not ready for that, it can be destructive to your life. And so all those elements play into why LGBT youth don't actually make the most sound decisions when in comparison to their heterosexual counterparts.
Sure, so it sounds like what you're saying is like because they're on the fringe of society and they're not normalized into sex education, they're not getting the information they need, and they often make bad decisions because of it. Yeah. They're basically left out of mainstream sex education, and this is like number 455 of a story we're reporting on where sex education in this country is failing young people.
Of course.
Again and again and again, whether it's with STDs and abstinence and zero tolerance. And now we're having, the issue with teen pregnancies among, people who don't identify in the normal categories.
So we have federal standards when it comes to all sorts of components of education, right? Especially when it comes to public education, there are federal standards. You have to have a certain level of reading under your belt before you graduate high school, or math and all that other stuff. But it's interesting because when it comes to the issue of sex education, it's really left up to the states. There are no federal regulations about it. And I think that it's actually critical for the federal government to jump in and say, no, Mississippi, you actually have the highest rate of unwanted pregnancies or teen pregnancies as a result of your lack of comprehensive sex ed. They only focus on abstinence-only education, which is leading to the highest teen pregnancy rate in the country. And so the government won't get involved in something like that because it's controversial, and I don't think that they genuinely care enough to get involved with something like that. But it's so important. I mean, even if you take the LGBT component out of this story and just focus on sex ed in general, it's a nightmare. I was lucky enough to be educated in California where we have comprehensive sex ed. Let me tell you something. I would have probably gotten pregnant as a teenager if it wasn't for the sex ed I got in California.
Yeah. I grew up in Texas, and the sex ed was horrible. I mean, what they taught us in schools was to, first of all, abstain. And that wasn't practical for majority of the kids that I went to high school with. Everyone was pressuring each other to have sex, which has gotten even worse now when you think about how over-sexualized kids are in 2015.
It's the media that they're being bombarded
exactly.
with,
And so you have that, and when you don't have that education, you start making horrible decisions. And then when you feel scared and you can't talk to your parents, you can't talk to your administrators, what do you do except for seek out information that's probably wrong, or go to your friends, and your friends don't know, and so you're going to start making these decisions based on nothing, and have these horrible results.
I mean, we need comprehensive sex ed now more than ever, especially when you consider the advancements in technology and how kids have so much access to things like porn, right? And so if you really want to mitigate the negative impact of pornography on teenagers, a good way of doing it is sitting them down and having a frank conversation with them about something as uncomfortable as sex.
You know, you could even do it where nowadays, again, going back to what I said before, of thinking about technology and getting with the times, you could do a course online and just require the kids to see that course in their house with the permission of the parents. You would not need it to be done in the school. It could be extra credit. It could be done in any other way. So that way kids who are at home and feel like, well, I don't want to be in this environment, or maybe the state is like, no, we don't want to do this, have an online course where the kids can just watch, because that's what they're doing anyway. You're not giving them the information, so they're going directly online and they're finding porn and they're finding everything else. So get with the times.
Absolutely. And I feel like it needs to be ongoing as well. We have this idea where it's like in 5th grade, I get to go on a field trip where somebody shows me a vulva and I'm supposed to like understand sex.
That's
like,
so true.
Sorry, that's
so
not
true.
how it works. And as you evolve, your need in sexual education obviously evolves. People who are extremely sexually active still don't really know what's going on.
Amen, sister.
And you know what I mean? Like, I'm constantly wondering, I mean, and I feel like I try to be as sex positive as possible, and I'm constantly surprised by what I don't know.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely. I mean, I remember we did this post-game show on cuckolding, and I was like, what is that, and how does it work, and how, like, what's the psychology behind it? And, like, look, I'm not saying that teenagers should be learning about cuckolding, but it's just an example of how as you grow older.
Teenagers, teach me cuckolding?
Yeah, like, there are so many things that adults don't understand.
We got some post-games.
I know, we got some post.
I know. By the way, you should be a member of the show.
Because like shit gets real in the post-games.
It does get real. We share a lot of personal things. All right, I promised you guys the stats on the male demographic here, so let me just quickly give that to you. 28.6% of self-identified gay or bisexual male students and 37.7% of males who had sex with both men and women had gotten someone pregnant, while only 10% of heterosexual male students or those with only female sex partners had impregnated someone. So, I mean, the stats there are so disproportionate.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm the statistics. I can tell you, and I can go back to being a teenager and feeling that I want to be my authentic self and tell people about my sexuality, but also having the pressures from my coaches, from my friends, from my teachers, from my father, from my uncles to pressure me to have sex. And when I'm pressuring these females to have sex, I'm not thinking about being responsible. I'm thinking about just doing what I need to do so that I can be perceived as most masculine and not stand out. And so you think about those numbers, of course these young men who are having these issues and not feeling comfortable, of course they're just going to have sex just to prove, but they're not thinking about where now you have heterosexual males who, I remember my teammates, they all had condoms because they were like given the condoms and were told like, you don't want to get pregnant. For me as a gay man, I didn't think a woman was going to get pregnant. I just thought, like, let me prove my masculinity.
That's a great point.
I know it's stupid, but
you know, that's the thought process that goes through a teenager's mind.